Okay, well, why don't you guys go ahead and make your statements. We'll start with you, Judge.
Good afternoon.
I'm sorry, that's all the time you have. Now we're going to be moving on.
Didn't I say that well, though? You know, I really did.
It was worth it.
It is nice to be with you. My goodness sakes, what a great spot. And it's good to share freedom and liberty and peace with people. I was just talking earlier today that really the watchword, I think, of my adult life is the slogan, to make the system work. It's our government, by thunder, and if it isn't working, whose fault is it? It's ours. And it's up to us to be more involved. And one way you can do that is certainly by voting, by registering your point of view, your issues, and they do count. In fact, you know, I am, as you're probably aware, I'm a Libertarian candidate for Vice President of the United States right now. And we are talking about trying to be in the mainstream of American political thought. We are both financially responsible and socially tolerant. And so we are the ones that do not want to put our troops into war all around the world. We say that we will attack no one unless they attack us or our allies. And so if you register a vote for that philosophy, you will be telling the other parties, hey, what you're doing is not acceptable to me. We register this vote, and then, by the way, when the parties see that we get so many votes, they're going to change their mind. It's going to matter. It's going to make a difference. I just came from, over here in Imperial Beach, they have Proposition S, as in Sierra. You know something? They're talking about having medical marijuanas in their town without having all of this interference from the state, from the federal government. You register your vote for that, for freedom, for being able to get your point of view across, and you make progress. I really believe that if you do not vote, that you are giving up your right to complain. I deeply believe that. You don't vote, you're giving up your right to complain. And of course, it isn't just you're voting yourself. We have numbers of activists here, people that care fervently about various thoughts. Talk to others, show them how important it is. If you write a letter to anyone for whom you can vote, it will be read and it will be responded to. In fact, there is, somehow I'm getting feedback. It's good feedback, though, I can tell you. But if, in fact, they get those letters, they have a formula, depending upon the office. For every letter they get, they believe that it at least represents 30 other people who feel that way within their district, within their area. And so then you get a group together. I don't care if it's the Boy Scouts or the or various PTA groups, whatever it is, and you invite one of your people for whom you can vote to come and talk to them about whatever issue is exciting and is important to you. Certainly drug policy is one, needle exchange, whatever it would be. They'll come. Politicians are really good at followership, and they'll follow where the votes are. However, if you write a letter to someone that you cannot vote for, you're wasting your stamp. It won't make any difference at all. If you talk to somebody that, you know, because I live in Orange County, if I were to talk to the senator from Oregon, she wouldn't care whatsoever. But if you can vote for them, and you do vote for them, it really does matter. We are running again for president and vice president. If we just get 5% of the vote, 5% of the vote in this election, I'll be horrified if that's all we do with Governor Gary Johnson for president. But if that's all we get, we will be able to, it will be a revolution, because we will then qualify for public funding, matching funds in the next presidential election, and it will then be the end, effectively, of the two-party system. We'll be able to get ballot access on any state in which we get at least 5% without jumping through all these hoops. What will then happen? It will require the radical extremes on each side to come more toward the middle. It will be effectively the end of the two-party system. We'll have that third-party balancing vote. You think your vote doesn't count? You vote and be just a part of that 5%, and it will be huge. So I'm here comfortably talking with friends. I look forward to your questions. I'm proud to be running with Governor Gary Johnson. It's the most exciting thing that's happened to me since the birth of my children. We're active. It's a big country. I'm getting on a red-eye flight tonight out of San Diego to New York at 9 o'clock tonight. So we're traveling around giving you that voice, giving you that third choice, giving you that option. But you are mute unless you vote. Voting is key. I have voted in every election after I turned 21 back in the dark ages when I became eligible to vote, and I have voted in every election since that time. How many of you join me? How many of you have voted every election since you became eligible? I hope so. There aren't quite enough hands being raised, but I go and task. I talk to high school kids, college kids, I tell them that, and then I get a commitment from them. I want you, when you're my age, to be able to say that, yes, I too voted in every election for which I was eligible, and then we give them a high five, and I look at them and say, you know, and if you don't, I'm coming looking for you. And they giggle and laugh. But it really is important. Give up your vote, you give up your voice, you vote, you're a part of the process, and then we will get good things done. You stay home and don't vote, you're giving that up, in my view, completely. So thank you, thanks for being here. Let's viva for liberty, let's stand for freedom. The soul of the United States of America is our freedoms and our liberties. I happen to view that the soul of our country is under attack by our very own government today. And Governor Johnson and Judge Jim Gray stand in favor of freedom, stand in favor of getting our troops out of these conflicts. This war on terror, so-called, we might as well declare war on Nazism in 1941. It doesn't work. Let's do this, let's register these votes, and let's get this done and bring this freedom back to our country that today is slipping through our fingers. Thanks so much. Good luck to us all. I can do better than that. Come on.
Take the mic. Do you want to take the mic? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Well, one nice thing about Libertopia is you get to hear drastically different opinions. I could not disagree more. When somebody asks themselves the question, who should sit on the throne, who should wield the power of authority and government, I say the answer absolutely does not matter, because you got the question wrong. As long as the debate is over who will have the right to rule us and control us and extort us, the answer doesn't matter. And I annoyed a lot of Ron Paul supporters when I pointed this out during his campaign, and I said, on a practical level, if I had to be owned by another human being, I think Ron Paul would be a pretty nice master. He probably wouldn't whip me that hard. He'd probably let me be free almost all of the time. However, when a slave attempts to become owned by a nicer master, even if he succeeds, he is not 1 inch closer to freedom. There is a fundamental difference between having a nicer master and being a free human being. There is no analog scale between totalitarianism and freedom. There is a scale between how nice your slave master is, and then there is the digital step over into you own yourself. A vote is never an inch towards freedom, because what it says, what it implies before you even see the name, before you even press the button, is I acknowledge that this pseudo-religious ritual that we engage in actually bestows upon certain human beings the right to rule. That is the lie that has to go, and until that lie goes, the vote doesn't make any difference. And when that lie goes, no one will ever vote for government again. This is not a problem of what is in Washington, D.C. or the state capitals. The problem does not reside there. The solution does not reside there. The problem resides between 300 million sets of ears that actually imagine that documents and rituals and all sorts of hoity-toity garbage can actually bestow superhuman rights upon mortals. The right to tax, the right to legislate, the right to regulate. It can't. And when people understand that, they stop engaging in the ritual that legitimizes the notion that there can be a rightful ruling class. Don't legitimize the lie that it is possible for one human being to rule another rightfully. It isn't. And when you vote, you say, I believe in this game, I believe in the process, I believe I am a slave of the state, and I just hope to get a nice master. That should not be good enough for human beings. Thank you.
So I'm really glad we can have disagreements here. I have a dream. I do have a dream, like voluntarists, that we can live in a completely free society. One where we make voluntary agreements, we live freely. It's a dream, it really is. But you know what? We're not there. We're just not there. Here's a good one. If all the public officials, all the government officials were to burst and vanish tonight, right now they vanish. Tomorrow, people would recreate them because they want to be ruled. That is just what's so. It's not what I want, it's what's so. So they'd recreate them. So really, we have to change culture first. We have to change culture, and one of the ways we can change culture is by voting for somebody who has a liberty message, or free, complete. Maybe we'll get an anarchist group out there that run, and they just spread the anarchist notion, or voluntarists, or whatever. But I think it's actually a self-defense vote. It's self-defense against the thugs who are taking away your stuff and doing all these things that they're talking about. It's a self-defense vote. It's like somebody's being robbed, your neighbor's being robbed, and that's really what's happening. Your neighbor's being robbed, and you're not doing anything. You're not stopping it by voting, because you can. If we get it right now, the game is if you have a majority, and sometimes it's a major majority, you can stop things. You can actually self-defense vote and change things, okay? So I believe in a self-defense vote, and that eventually we will get to this complete freedom. That is my dream. I think a lot of you agree with that. I think libertarians do too. So, well, some of you guys might have different views. Anyways, I do believe that we can have a tactic. It's a tactic. This is all a freaking game, guys. It's a tactic of voting for somebody who has a message that we want to undo these unjust things that these fine gentlemen are talking about. We want to undo them. And I do believe we have to do it incrementally, because if it goes away, vanishes overnight, they're going to recreate it. Thank you.
The amount of ahistorical thinking in the libertarian political movement is always kind of startling to me, because there seems to be this Garden of Eden fantasy about the good state, you know, that real great state back in the day. If we just get back to that, then things will be better. There were a lot of Native Americans here before the white guys came who may have a different opinion of the founding of the U.S. There were a whole bunch of slaves. Women, not a lot of rights there for women. Some of the founding fathers were complete nutbags. You know, George Washington had 11 of his slaves' teeth pulled out just so he could try and insert them in his own mouth because he had some dental problems. But that's just nuts. And, you know, why did they want to secede? Well, according to Albert J. Nock, they wanted to secede from the UK, or England, because they wanted to expand westward, and they all had financial interest in expanding westward, and England wouldn't let them. Let's have a revolution so we can up our real estate prices. Wasn't the first real estate boom in the US, probably won't be the last. The Empire of America started on slavery. It started on biological warfare against the native inhabitants. This is not something we want to go back to. There's no rewinding the clock to a good system. I mean, I'm with Rothbard, I'm with Nock, I'm with other thinkers, with Spooner, that the state is a criminal organization. And if you get confused, just insert the word mafia. So if I come towards you and I say, listen, we've got a real problem with the mafia in our community, so let's infiltrate it. Let's grow hair on our backs. I'm going to completely stereotype the Italians here. Let's get real good at putting bricks up. Let's get lots of makeup on our women. And we're going to infiltrate the mafia, and we're going to work our way to the top, see? And then we're going to turn it into a charity. We laugh, because it would be ludicrous, because we would understand that the purpose of the mafia is criminality. It's theft, it's plunder, it's exploitation, it's destruction. And the only time they protect their neighborhoods is to defend their income, in the same way that you'll put up fences around your cattle to keep the coyotes out. It's not because you love your cattle, it's because you want to keep them from being eaten by the coyotes. So yeah, they'll give us free health care. I mean, farmers will give health care to their cattle too. not because they want them to be free. I mean, we're free-range serfs. We get to choose our own jobs now. Before, you used to get assigned them, right, in the Middle Ages. You just sort of bought and sold with the land. We're free-range serfs now, but that's only because it's more productive to the ruling class. They don't care about our freedom. I mean, the next stage after free range is not freedom, it's Chicken McNugget box. So the idea that we can infiltrate some criminal organization and then turn it to virtue, turn it to the genuine goodness of its honorable intentions, of its stated purposes, is ludicrous. And I challenge the people. Start small. If you tell me that you can bench press 500 pounds, I'm going to give you a yogurt cup and a popsicle stick and see if you can lift that. And if you can't lift that, I'm going to have some significant skepticism about your ability to bench press 500 pounds. The federal government, the United States government, is the largest, most powerful, richest, most heavily armed gang in the history of the known universe. We really got to turn this to good? You really think you got those superhero powers to turn that institution to good? The institution which will jail at whim innocent citizens who will murder by the millions. You know, statistics say 25 to 30 million people overseas killed by US foreign policy since the end of the Second World War alone. Genocidal, murderous, selling off the unborn to foreign bankers for the sake of grabbing a few votes in the here and now. This is sick human behavior. This is pathological. This is psychotic. This is the stone heart, Satan, evil, blood-squeezed brain of evil right in front of us. And the idea that we can put a little lipstick on it, nice little wig, go on a date, she'll come around. It's not going to happen. This is delusional. The Libertarian Party, libertarianism, has been trying for the last 40 years to make the state smaller. It's grown 5 to 7 times larger, not even counting the debt, not even counting the unfunded liabilities. Since the 18th century, since the 17th century in England, we've been trying to restrain the power of the state with language, with arguments, with rhetoric. How big is the state now? We've never had a larger government in the history of the known universe after 300 years of trying to control it with voting. Come on, people. What is that definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, trying to expect a different result. Tell me how the next time is going to be different than the last 300 years. Since the age of Socrates, people have been trying to restrain the evil of centralized coercive power through language, through philosophy, through bumper stickers. Do you really think that 2,501 years is going to be the big difference? If we keep doing the same thing, it's going to change? No, we recognize the evil of the institution and we fight against it. Intellectually, with the moral arguments. The state is an effect of people's belief system, as Larkin said. It's somewhere to the east, it's somewhere to the right of your left ear and to the left of your right ear. That's where statism really exists. We fight that virus without compromise, without attempting to enter into hell and turn it into heaven. Satan has too much power. He can't do it. He can't do it. You cannot vote evil into good. And if people believe that they can, I invite them. It's very easy to show. Go to some local criminal gang, infiltrate it, and show me how it's going to work. Show me how you can turn the mafia into the United Way. Show me how you can turn... It doesn't even... If you feel that the violence is too strict or too dangerous, no problem. You can just go to some Latino group, to pick any random example. Go to some Latino group and have it start to advocate against Latinos. Because you're trying to enter into an organization and turn to the opposite of its stated purpose. Try to join the public sector teachers union and get it to advocate for vouchers. And for private schools and get it to advocate to cut taxpayer coerced funding for public schools. Join the farmers union, get them to argue against agricultural subsidies. Go join the sugars union, get them to advocate against protectionism. You can't do it. These organizations will eat you alive and spit you out. Their express purpose is to steal from the general population through lies and pious sentiments. So I challenge the people, don't talk to me about taking on the federal government and turning it to virtue. I mean, that's ridiculous. Start small, start local. Show me the magical alchemy that turns evil into virtue in a local organization. They never have even remotely tried it. In fact, when I mention it, everybody laughs. But when you understand what the government is, and you hear these proposals, you'll laugh even harder.
I have to sit down. Can you hear me? All right, my knee or my leg starts quivering. I'm going to sit down on you, but I'm going to try this for a second. My name is Mike Benoit. I'm a local activist here in San Diego, run for Congress about 7 times now. And I'm not here to argue that the vote is the answer, because it's not the answer. And it's not the solution, and you're never going to have a benevolent government. So if people think that's the goal, you might as well be an anarchist. That's not the goal. Government will never be your buddy and your best friend. Okay? And the idea that voting is absolutely worthless is another false idea. Because, you know, people that voted for Ron Paul, and by the way, Ron Paul wasn't somebody who wanted to be anybody's master. He's not a prohibitionist, he's an abolitionist. And he's the only guy in Congress that I had any faith in out of 535. And it's because the man was solid liberty. And his whole purpose was to increase human liberty and to remove the tyranny that these politicians and the government had placed on us over the centuries. So the only answer is disobey. There's no other answer. But the vote does mean something. All the people that rallied around Ron Paul and voted for Ron Paul were communicating no more Fed, no more tyrannical banking system. The people that voted and rallied around Ron Paul were communicating end the wars overseas, end foreign aid, end the drug wars, end all this repression, end the income tax. That's what that vote meant. And there's issues on the ballot now where the controllers, the tyrants, they want to take more of our freedom, more of our rights away. So I would say, oh, I'm not going to vote. So let's not vote on a proposition that is violating more people. And there's people who say, I don't want to participate in the system. They won't go out and sit on a jury. Now, there's somebody being prosecuted for a tyrannical drug law, and a lot of anarchists I know, not all of them, because the people that run the Fully Informed Jury Association are anarchists. They hate it when I talk politics. But many of the anarchists I know will not. They'll find a way to get out of jury duty. And I mean, that's like saying I'm not going to help Anne Frank because that'd be participating in the system. You know, you sit on the jury and you overturn tyrannical laws that way. So, you know, and voting for, say, the Libertarian candidate versus the other 2 candidates, you're not communicating or voting that these guys are going to fix everything, they're going to save us. You're communicating that this 2-party scam stands for all those things that we're against. Romney, got a little, on Facebook I'm having a little fun, I call him Ramama, and Obama. They stand for exactly the same things. They stand for things like the UN, the IMF, the Federal Reserve Bank, the wars overseas, bailouts, all of this stuff. And so by not voting, say, for the Libertarians, you're saying the message that gets communicated to everybody out there is that all the voters want this tyranny of the 2 major parties. So to wrap it up, not take too much time, the only way you can beat tyranny is to resist. And if you like to smoke pot, don't just complain. Get your friends together and go in front of the courthouse, light them up, transfer them from one person to another. Or if it's the IRS tyranny that you hate, don't file that 1040. There's study Larkin Rose's material, study mine, study Otto Skinner's, study Irwin Schiff, and find out how you can disobey, because that's the only way you're going to bring tyranny down. Thank you.
This is fun. I don't think we could hear the argument for not voting better than we've heard it. The problem is that there's a complete disconnect. I simply disagree with the thesis, with the premise, because there's always going to be a government. Except, remember when Robinson Crusoe was on the island by himself. Then there wasn't a government, but remember when he finally found Friday, all of a sudden then there is something in place that will have one person governing another. And to ignore the fact, you cannot vote, you can abandon government, somebody's going to be there, folks. It's a fact of life. It's a fact of reality. And if we back out or we go to the beach, not a bad beach to go to, somebody is going to come in and occupy that zone. Somebody will do it. They always have, they always will. You can talk about the Native Americans. They had a hierarchy. They had a government. You always will have a government. So the question is, and you go through this parade of horribles, and all of these things that are bad going on in society, and my goodness sakes, do I agree with them. But you're going to have them one way or the other. So you try to reduce the harmful effects. You try to increase freedom. The way you do that is to put somebody that will be in charge one way or the other in some form of a government, be it tyranny, democracy, monarchy, whatever it's going to be. There will always be one. Always. So the question is, what kind? The question is, are we going to abandon our voices to those that will come forward? Are we going to abandon saying, oh, I'm going to be a peacenik, so I'm not going to protect myself? Then you're going to have Nazi Germany coming in and controlling you. If you're going to have a people together that are going to protect themselves, immediately you have a government of some form. You're going to need to marshal some form of crops, some form of assistance to them, some form of weapon. You're going to have a government. So they are ignoring that fact, and it's simply a disconnect. We're going to have one. The question is, just like you say, what kind will it be? Will it be better tomorrow than it is today? Governor Gary Johnson was very successful in New Mexico, standing up for those freedoms, reducing the intrusion of liberty. Today we have an obese federal government. It's got to be pruned back. We have the best document written by the hand of mankind. It's called the United States Constitution. I wasn't aware about the George Washington and dental story, and that's abhorrent. And you know, Jefferson owned slave, all these people too. But we do have a magnificent document. Let's read it. If we don't like it, let's change it. Let's repeal the 16th Amendment. Let's repeal the income tax. Let's repeal the National Defense Authorization Act, so-called, where anybody, probably me more likely, could be labeled a terrorist, could be detained, translation, arrested, without charges. Because of this government, you're going to simply back off it and say, oh, it doesn't exist? It will always exist unless people of goodwill stand up and say no. We are standing up and saying no. We are standing up for you whether you vote or not, and standing up for your freedoms. It's a question of which type do you want, guys. And the only way to do it is to participate.
Well, at least this forum, you get actual fundamental disagreements to debate about. Not only will there not always be a government, there has never been a government. Government is Santa Claus. Government is a hallucination in people's heads because they were taught to believe that magical rituals can bestow superhuman rights upon human beings. Again, Washington is not the problem. The problem is that people imagine a moral obligation to obey other human beings who wear the mask of government. Let me use the example of Ron Paul. I will say I totally agree with Michael that resistance is extremely important. Incidentally, I'm all for jury nullification because it's a fundamentally anarchistic action. It is walking up to authority and saying, I know you told us that this person should have done this, but, well, frankly, we don't care that you said this person should have done this, we're letting him go. But imagine this. When you hear somebody say you have to participate, participate in what? Participate in running around in circles and doing magic chants. Imagine if instead of voting for Ron Paul, instead of campaigning, and I have no question about the sincerity and good intentions of all the people who did that, what if the millions of people who tried to elect Ron Paul and got absolutely nothing as a result, instead of voting said, dear IRS, we're not waiting around for the masters to repeal you, we're just not playing anymore. If 5 million people said, we're not going to vote, we're not going to file, we're not going to pay, we're going to disobey you, you wouldn't need an election, you wouldn't even need a revolution. The act of voting shows that you're still stuck in the trap. You're still enslaved inside your own head because you still imagine that you need the permission of your masters to be free, that you're still going to beg the masters, please change your legislation and tell us we're allowed to be free. As long as you say that, you're not even free inside your own head. When you become free inside your own head, you don't talk to the masters anymore. You just freaking ignore them.
That's part of my dream. That's part of my dream, that we can actually realize that. But we're not there yet. Okay? We don't have 5 million people who are willing to not pay their taxes, who are willing to do that yet. We just don't have it. That's our culture is not there. I'd love for that to happen. I really would. But I really do think we can use the voting system as a tactic to communicate these ideas of liberty and freedom. I mean, forget that it's going to be useful, that we're actually going to do something in legislation. Forget that. Okay, that's fine. We're not going to win that. But we can use the platforms. Ron Paul doing nothing? What do you mean all the people that he's introduced to liberty, to freedom? People who are asleep, people are asleep. We need to wake them up, and voting and being part of a candidate, these candidates here, can actually wake people up. So I invite an anarchist to start a campaign. Just use it as a tactic to educate people on anarchy, on voluntarism. Wouldn't that be like weird? Like, do it. I challenge you to do that. So I think that you guys are wasting your energy on convincing people not to vote. You can vote or not. I really don't care. All I'm saying is, we can use it as a tactic to communicate to people. We can use it as a tactic to get out the message, to actually get to that point where we can all do that and feel good about it, that 5 million people are just going to say no, and we're not going to take it anymore. So I challenge all of you to start an anarchy campaign. I would love to, I'll help promote it. So please consider voting if you choose. If you don't, you don't. But consider voting or running just to get it's a marketing thing. You're marketing. You've got all these people, you've got millions of people. If they were able to get up on the stage of a debate, they could wake up millions of people who don't think like that, because the system has showed them over years, over centuries, that we have to have wars, that we have to have this. Well, let's wake them up. Let's get these people out there talking about freedom, complete freedom. That's why I think we need to support this. It's not about changing legislation. Maybe we want to change some in self-defense, but I think it's more about educating people so we can actually have that culture of freedom and voluntariness.
It's weird how libertarians feel that government programs don't work except for voting. It's just another government program, and it just achieves the opposite of its claims. It also bothers me when libertarians say you got to go and be involved in politics in order to have an audience. I mean, Larkin's show, Larkin's books, I mean, I've got 50 million downloads. I mean, isn't that good enough? I mean, doesn't that count? Well, it's not politics. In fact, if I were in politics, it'd be a whole lot less. An anarchist going into politics? Join me in voting for the evil that I condemn. You know, when there's an old saying that says, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And if you believe that political action is how to achieve freedom, it crowds out other solutions. There's a lack of imagination, a lack of creativity, a lack of self-challenging in the libertarian movement. Because there's two things, politics and academia. That's it. That seems to be the entire historical contribution. Write books, become an academic, or do politics. And that is an obscuring of what really needs to be done, in my opinion. Actually, more than my opinion. I think it's a fact. You need to tell me. So, for instance, did you know that 80 to 90% of parents still spank their children? Where can we have the most effect in reducing the amount of violence in the world? Do you not think that being spanked by a parent gives you a relationship to authority that is hierarchical, that is fundamentally hypocritical? You ever seen this? Don't hit your sister. You're not allowed to steal. Pay me my taxes. Do you see the continuity? The hypocrisy of the aggression used within the home translates directly to people's inability to see the hypocrisy of the violence affected in society. You start with what is local. You start with what you can affect. You start with what you can change. If we as a community, I wrote an article recently, went out in a wide variety of libertarian avenues, got almost no response to it. Very interesting. Does spanking violate the non-aggression principle? Do you spank in self-defense? Are they coming at you with an axe? No. Spanking is a violation of the non-aggression principle. Yelling at your children, threatening abandonment, violation of the non-aggression principle. I spoke at Freedom Fest in Vegas. Lots of people come up. I love you all come up and say, great, show's changed my life, fantastic. Thing I'm most proud about, literally 20 families came up, hundreds of people, and said, you know what, listen to your show, listen to you interview the experts, heard the statistics on the effects of spanking, and don't hit my kids anymore, apologize to them. That is changing the world. That is reducing the amount of violence in the world. And that is going to raise children to view authority as a benevolent resource that is egalitarian, not as a hypocritical, violence-condemning, violent-enforcing institution that you can't question, that is authoritarian, that is top-down, that is bullying. See, we teach children to speak the language of statism in the home long before they go out into the world, long before they go to public school. Public school couldn't work if we didn't. I guess it doesn't work because they drug them now anyway. But you see, we teach the children to speak the language of hierarchy way before they go out into the world. Statism is just an effect of what happens between parents and children. This isn't just a theory. You can, I got tons of information on my website, subject matter experts, scientific studies, psychological studies. This is very well established. If we stop aggressing against children, we immediately and instantly reduce the amount of violence in the world. We raise the quality of children. We lend them to be able to think. You know, most people can't think because they've suffered aggression at home. This is scientifically well proven. Most people, when their thinking is challenged, we've all seen this, fight or flight mechanism gets activated in the brain, they panic, they make up some excuse, and the reasoning that they put forward is just ex post facto nonsense. It's static, it's garbage to cover up what they experienced when they were children. It's all very well established. We need people to be smarter, and the way that they're smarter is don't aggress against children at home. That leads them to be free, to be curious, to explore, to think, to reason, and it leads them to not be afraid if their ideas are challenged. If we don't teach children the language of hierarchy and aggression and hypocritical top-down authoritarianism, they'll grow up, they don't speak the state. They don't speak statism. You know, then the state will look to them. You know, like when I was a kid, you get these National Geographics. I don't know, there's some people old enough to know what that is. What, was that online? On a DVD? No, paper, man, paper. And, you know, after looking at the boobs, okay, a long while after looking at the boobs, I would flip over and you'd see them worshiping these weird giant stone chickens, you know, and stuff, and be like, oh, that's really weird. You know, of course, they'd look at, you know, us and say, why are you, the guy doing aerobics on the stick, why are you worshiping him? It would look weird to them, right? But when we look at those religions and we don't have that history, you know, like you see that Buddha guy, you know, it's like maybe he could use some help from the aerobics guy because, you know, he's out of it. But if we don't grow up in that religion, we look at those, the idols that they worship, and we say, well, that's kind of weird. And if we raise children without a top-down hierarchy, without aggression, without violence, then when they see these finger-wagging statist jerks, they don't speak their language. It looks as foreign to them as weird stone Egyptian idols look to us. That has no power over us because we haven't lived, breathed, and been traumatized by it since we were born. And I'm just saying this not to convince everyone of this, obviously look into it, but just to say it's not politics or nothing, and it really bothers me when people say it's politics, or if you're not doing politics, you're not doing libertarianism. I would argue, if you're not focusing on stuff that people can actually change, like no aggression in the home, no timeouts, no spanking, no yelling, well, you're just fighting in the wind. You're talking, you're yelling at these things, you're yelling at clouds rather than getting something real done, something practical done, something that people can really change in their lives, which, it's been fairly well established, will lead to a free society inexorably. It's not going to come from the top down. It comes from the inside.
Okay, I'm going to sit down this time. This is like this debate is supposed to be about voting or not voting. Voting is the answer. Voting is worthless. And it's neither of those things. And what I've noticed in the general population, whether libertarian, anarchist, Republican, or Democrat, there was a comment made about millions and millions of people working and supporting Ron Paul. And look at the results. Well, those numbers were more like 30 or 40 people in San Diego County actually doing something. Those numbers were 5,000 people came to University of San Diego, University of California at San Diego to hear the rock star. Those weren't people that were fighting for liberty. And the idea, you know, I don't know why this idea has to be voting is everything or voting is nothing. An anarchist could run for office. In fact, we have Jesse Thomas, who ran for office, and his purpose was to preach anarchy. And so that's his purpose, that's what he wants to do. But to think that your vote is everything, I know people say, don't blame me, I didn't vote for so-and-so. Or I voted for Ron Paul, don't blame me. What do you really think that is? A vote. I didn't vote for Ron Paul, okay, because I'm a libertarian and he's a Republican. But I headed up the San Diego Ron Paul meetup group. And I got Ron Paul thousands of votes. And I spent a lot of money on it. And I gave a lot of talks about the philosophy of liberty and about all these things we all complain about. So if that's the tool that people use to increase liberty, they do something. And that's what I'll complain about. Not that I'll complain about anarchists, not because they don't participate in the political system, is because they don't resist tyranny. They don't join me passing out flyers for the Fully Informed Jury Association and get on these juries. They don't have what it takes to go up and confront the tyrants and say, you know what, I think marijuana should be legal, I'm smoking it, arrest me. I run for office not because I'm going to fix government. I want to be a United States congressman so I can be in the TSA line, somebody that the news would pay attention to, and I'd be up and down the line talking to everybody, telling them what a travesty it is and that they should be ashamed of themselves for subjecting themselves to this tyranny. I'd want to go around telling people about the tyranny of the IRS, how this whole system has enslaved us, and we accept this enslavement because, oh, it's the law. You know, and so that's another place for juries to be, is sending people home that have been convicted of doing nothing more than keeping the fruits of their labor. And the list goes on and on. So you're not going to be free, none of us, until we get off our seats and go out there and resist the tyranny. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just take 1 minute. What you have heard over here makes perfect sense as long as you're willing to close your eyes to reality. That's the truth. Vietnam was a travesty, misguided, wrong, etc. Vietnam was brought to an end because of voting. Because we brought down LBJ, he knew he wasn't even going to win re-election, so he stopped. It never would have been brought down without voting. Voting is not going to bring the troops home from Afghanistan. You can not vote, you can talk all you want to. Voting will keep us from bombing Iran, going to war with Iran. It is a way. This is not a perfect world. I'm the first to tell you. But it is a real world, and there's going to be power. If we didn't have a government, you're saying, oh, don't agree with government. Nonsense. We would have an awful lot more rape, robbery, and murder in our society than we do now. It's just simply a fact. So we're going to have a government, otherwise we're going to have that anarchy that you're not going to want. So it's a question of what kind of government shall we have? Yes, government is imperfect. Yes, all of those things. But we, Governor Gary Johnson and I, and many others, Christie, Mike, and others, are working to make our government better. More freedom, more liberty, more prosperity, more equal opportunity. So you can give up and go to the beach if you want to, and you can pontificate about things that are not real. You are not doing your children a service, sir, under any circumstances, by not teaching them discipline. Oh, I want my child to be able to express himself, so I don't want to give him discipline. That works really well until they start drawing on somebody's wallpaper in their living room, and then it just doesn't work so well. You've got to have discipline in this world, one way or the other. So those are things that are reality. Oh, I wish it weren't true. You can wish all you want to. Reality is here, folks, and government is too. That's a question of how is it going to be. And if you don't participate, I guarantee you somebody else will, and you're not going to like the results.
I'll be really short because I've already said most of what I want to say. Vietnam. It happened for one reason. Americans are taught that authority is real. Lots and lots of Americans went to the other side of the world to try to murder people they knew nothing about because they believed in government. We wouldn't need an election if they were anarchists. Anarchists don't go commit murder because government tells them to. And as far as the idea of, oh, look how bad everything would be if we didn't have a government, pick any crime you want. Murder, assault, kidnapping, robbery, whatever. See how often it's done by private individuals. See how often it's done by people acting in the name of government. It won't even be close.
You want to do questions? Because I'm yeah.
Do you have questions or comments?
Okay.
Do it. Yeah, if you can take a mic.
Yeah, I'll start with Mike. You talk about how anarchists don't do anything important. They don't do any of the work to fight tyranny.
No, you've got to rephrase your question. That's not what I said.
Okay.
I said you find it in all groups. Most people in all groups, whether it be anarchists, Republicans, or Democrats, do very little more than talk. They don't go in and get involved in the, educating people about the power under the jury, or going out and actually facing the man and standing up and resisting. That's what I said.
I will tell you that I'm an anarchist, and I have never faced the man. I've never been arrested for anything I've done in protest. I've never handed out leaflets. I know that is fighting the tyranny, but the tyranny that I have fought is I have sat down face to face with my father and discussed with him what happened in our home as I grew up. And if you think that wasn't hard, obviously you've never tried it. Because that is the real work. Because to stand in front of a courthouse and wave a flag and wave a pamphlet, it's fighting an imaginary ghost.
Okay, so in your mind that was a huge thing, okay? In my mind, it was a huge thing growing up with my father there, who was an abusive drunk that beat my mother up and beat the kids up regularly. That's just part of life, and I'm not going to cry and complain about it. But so you dealt with your father, that's good. You had communication, you got through whatever barriers there. And maybe you'll change his frame of work or mind. But I'm talking about people actually going out and resisting the tyrants in government. And it's mostly talk from all political persuasions. I used a Ron Paul example, and 30 people would go out and try to get people to vote, and people were real proud of themselves because they voted for Ron Paul or they went to a rally. That's not going to work. That's not going to make it happen.
Well, obviously there's nothing to say to you, Mike. My next point is to Jim. You talked about Vietnam and how Vietnam was stopped because of a vote. And I tend to disagree. I wasn't around for Vietnam, But all I can imagine from what I've known from people who were in Vietnam is that people telling soldiers that what you're doing is wrong, and I am not going to be your friend because you're committing murder because someone told you to. You know, that's really what it is. It's about peer pressure. It's about, you know, it's about ostracism. You know, and how we stop from bombing Iran is you say, look, I am not willing to bomb Iran because that's wrong. And you talk to people about what's right and what's wrong. And you say, hey, if you're going to support bombing Iran, you're not my friend anymore. And to stand up to people and tell them what you really feel, you know, that's what changes the world. I mean, when I deal with other parents and I tell them, not, you know, well, we don't have time this weekend, we can't see you anymore, and let the relationship just fizzle away, that's me running from reality. Me fighting the tyranny is saying, you are no longer our friend anymore because you hit your child, and that is wrong. That's how you change the world.
And just to clarify, technically the war in Vietnam ended because the army was disintegrating. Because they'd been in the jungle for years, they were incredibly abusing drugs, they were fragging their own heads. The army was completely disintegrating, they had to pull it out. I mean, it's completely falling apart. It wasn't voting that did that.
John, what you're saying is true. Social pressure, individual pressure, with your father, with your neighbors, anything else. But why is that exclusive? You can do both. I do both. I actually protested. I was in the second year of law school at USC when Nixon went into Cambodia. I led a peace march from USC to the steps of City Hall. We sent 35,000 letters to Nixon saying, get out of Cambodia. By the way, I was also in Vietnam. I got a combat action ribbon in Vietnam. So, but the way that the Vietnam War stopped, you can tell President Obama or Governor Romney all you want to. You're not going to be my friend. But unless he's not afraid of that, he's still going to bomb Iran unless the votes are not there. It's so idealistic, it just doesn't work on that level. Just doesn't.
See, I'm not going to tell Obama he's not my friend because I've never talked to Obama and he's not my friend.
Okay,
I'm going to tell my neighbor.
We've got to make sure we get to the next. I think that's
sure,
a fair
absolutely.
point. I appreciate your points. Thank you.
First, I want to thank all of you for being here and speaking. The debate was wonderful. My question is for the judge. I'm having a bit of a brain aneurysm due to cognitive dissonance because I was positive that I just heard you equate violence against children to discipline. And my question is, do you feel that violence against children is acceptable under the guise of discipline?
Look, I heard someone even say no timeouts. I mean, that means no discipline. You know, just reasoning with a 3-year-old in a tantrum doesn't work. You put them on a timeout and you put them in their room. You're doing them a favor. You're doing them a favor. And otherwise, it just depends. I actually did. I have 3 children. I probably spanked each one maybe once or twice in my life, in their lives. They knew I would. They didn't have to. It did them a favor. If we don't have prisons, I happen to believe that prisons for violence is a good thing. I think removing people from society, it does have a deterrence. That's a big spanking. I think we obviously overdo it. I've taken public positions on that and everything else. I don't need to defend my qualifications. Discipline sometimes means, yes, you spank a child for not putting if he runs into the street without looking for cars, yes, I would spank my child. And I did. Twice. They're pretty good kids too, by the way. And we get along great.
Just to clarify, I wasn't speaking about violence against children to protect them from death or anything like that. I was just talking about violence to protect them, to to discipline them.
It's a question. I'm disciplining my child for not running into the street.
Yeah. Of course, if a child runs into the street, that's a failure of parenting. I don't know why the child would be punished.
Oh, come on.
Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Thank you all for your time. My question is for Mr. Jim Gray. You had mentioned reality and saying that the idea of no government is unrealistic, but then on the other hand, you're saying that voting, the collection of choices, is what's going to make reality in politics. So then why would it be unrealistic to imagine that we could make the choice to not participate and then not have a government or not have a monopoly on violence?
And thank you. The answer is you can participate or not participate. We will always have a government. It can be a juvenile street gang has a government. Everybody has a pecking order. You can look at a flock of geese and they have a pecking order also. So there will always be a government, end of discussion. Question is, how will it be? What will it be? And if you don't participate, once again, I promise you, somebody else will. That's the answer, and it's naive to think otherwise.
Yeah, and if you remember, before the 18th century, we always had slavery. Every human society always had slavery, and so clearly we're always going to have slavery. Before women were equal, there was no possibility of women having property rights, having educational opportunities, so it's never going to happen. So we never have to fight for change because the evils are inevitable.
It was actually accomplished through government, you might recall.
What?
Thank you. And actually,
governments enforce slavery around the world. Anyway,
I would just like to say
can we
that-
get started? We've got a whole bunch of people and not much time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't even remember what I was going to ask.
I think that's the best question so far.
I know. I'll ask the same question I did last year because I never really did get a clear answer. Regarding this whole participation in politics thing, or writing a book or academia, people have been doing that for a long, long time, hundreds of years, and I notice the state keeps growing, even though people keep participating in politics. So, I work in IT, and if I keep doing something and it doesn't work or keeps breaking, I tend to think that that means I'm doing something wrong, and I change my approach. So I'm really puzzled on this idea that participating in the political system actually brings change. When you might win a few battles here and there, somebody might get a vote, or maybe, but the state still grows. I mean, they still get more power. That's the bottom line. So, so I'm curious what the evidence is that this idea of participating in politics is actually an effective strategy for achieving personal liberty.
You are certainly right, the government continues to grow. It is an obese government today that has usurped all kinds of power, from the states to local governments, and assuredly from the people, no question about it. So you have an option. You can give up, you can go to the beach, give up, although the beach will start getting in on you, or you can participate. Those are your two options. Give up or try to make it better.
That's a totally false dichotomy, man. I'm sorry.
Really? Okay, then we disagree.
Well, I'd like to answer that one. We have those 5 million that we want to not pay their taxes. We need to talk to them, okay? You don't have to get into politics. Don't, right? Just don't.
No,
You're not going to, okay?
That's true.
But the people who want to, we need to change minds and hearts. We need to wake up people. There's nothing wrong and evil about voting or running for politics as a tactic. There's nothing wrong. And we have so few people here. For us to be warring is ludicrous. It's ridiculous. We should be working together. You should be helping us because we want the same thing in the end.
Well,
so
maybe.
Don't vote. Well, maybe. You're right. Maybe I think a lot of us do. I don't think it's going to happen by not voting. That's my belief. I don't think no voting is going to get us to those 5 million.
I mean, did the Soviet Union fall because there was an election?
I really don't know the answer.
I don't think that.
Listen, I'm sorry, but fascinating. We could go on all afternoon. I'd
like to answer that question too.
Okay, but we have a speaker waiting, so if you can keep it brief, that'd be great.
All right. The answer is you're going to have less and less people participating, but those that are participating are the ones who want to control and rule and prohibit you from your natural rights. And so it doesn't matter. And then the rest just follow because they're afraid to resist the tyranny. We talk about, I'm sorry this isn't quick, switching back to Vietnam. I was one of the last draftees. My first day in basic training, I refused to get out of the bunk. But Vietnam came down because of the fatigue and because of the pressure from society. It wasn't Richard Nixon, actually. He's like the current regime. The Romney guys are going to keep it going because Richard Nixon had been in power how many years? It was 1975 before it ended. So the answer is not voting again or not voting. But if I call for hands, I don't like to do this because I feel it's controlling. How many people still file an income tax return? See, that's how they get their power and their money in the Federal Reserve banking system to continue the tyranny upon us, whether we're Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, or anarchist. We have to resist the tyranny. It's the only way out.
All right, well, listen, I really want to thank the audience. Thank you I'm sorry we didn't get a chance. We'll be around all weekend, so be sure to chat with us if you can. Really want to thank the panel. Next up.